Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
Well, hello, everybody. We're so excited to have Jake Williams here with us today. Jake is a tour guide in Montgomery, Alabama, and I was lucky enough to get to learn such crucial history from him in the summer of 2019. He was a participant in the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March and also worked hard to organize and register Black people to vote. So excited to get to share not only his stories and his knowledge, but also just the incredible light and brilliant human being that is Jake. So thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
We're so excited to have you. And we wanted to start off by asking you about what life was like growing up in Alabama in the heat of the civil rights movement.
Oh, well, I like to say that I'm a product of the Jim Crow South. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. I was born in rural Lowndes County, Alabama. Lowndes County is situated midways between Montgomery and Selma. It's the main artery of the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March of 1965. Growing up, I'm the baby of 16 kids, and we were the reason why they came up with the word of poor, because we were super poor. My bringing up, you look forward to, only thing you had to look forward to was picking cotton and earning what little money you could. At that time, they paid you 2 cents for each pound of cotton that you picked. And my mom set a goal for me to pick 50 pounds of cotton each day. And I didn't quite reach that goal. I would come up with 46, 47, 48 pounds of cotton each day, but nevertheless, since it wasn't 50 pounds, I still got a whooping. But growing up, it was, I did not live in a house with inside plumbing or running water until my senior year in high school. And, we just, as a matter of fact, the first house that my parents owned, became homeowners, was purchased in my senior year of high school. All the rest of the time, we was pretty much sharecroppers living on somebody else's property. So I was raised up real poor, and didn't have, like I say, indoor plumbing or water or any of that when I was growing up. It was I grew up thinking that my mom got sick one time and had to go to the doctor. And I remember as a little child thinking that Black people couldn't be doctors because I had not been exposed to anything like that. The only professional Black people I had came in contact with in my upbringing was teachers and preachers. So it was just dawned on me that it was beyond Black people to achieve such goals as that.
We wanted to just go back to the Voting Rights March. And so can you just tell us a little bit about your story walking alongside Martin Luther King, and how did it feel to be part of such a historical moment in American history, not only then, but looking back on it now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back. I'm a history major. I graduated from the Alabama State University. So we always got to dab back into history to understand the process, what was happening at that time. And to go back, we even got to go back to the time of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution that abolished slavery and that gave Black men the right to vote. And Of course, we went into a civil war and all of that, but we did come out 1870. The 14th Amendment, I believe 14th Amendment was ratified to the US Constitution, giving Black men the right to vote. So now you got to understand, 1870, that amendment is ratified, giving Black men the right to vote. From roughly 1867, though, roughly 1867 to 1876, Black peoples are getting elected to office all over the country. My great uncle served in the Alabama House of Representatives in 1872. Of course, my great grandfather served in the Union Army during the Civil War. But so they was getting elected to office all over the land, but came along the president election of 77. In that president election, there was some horse trading done. Prior to that, as a condition for those rebellion states to come back into the Union, they had to agree to allow federal troops to be stationed throughout the South. And those troops were stationed there for the purpose of ensuring that those formerly enslaved people newly found freedom and rights wouldn't be taken away from them. So therefore, those troops was, but in the president election of 1876, there was some horse, they came down to, the Electoral College came down to a dead heat, but there was one electoral vote out. And they had to make a deal, saying, you know, Rufus Hayes, I believe he was, says, you make me the president, I'll pull all the troops out the South. So that's what they did, and that's what he did. And with the pulling of all the federal troops out the South, those former enslaved people, the rights that they had acquired was gradually through various means of terrorism and poll tax and literacy tax. All of those things combined to just take away the rights that Black people had acquired to the voting rights. So I have to bring it back to that. We're speaking of 1870, and then we're going to fast forward to 1965. So we're roughly talking about, what, 95 years later. The rights that we had in 1870, we're trying to, in 1965, we're marching, trying to get those rights back. And that's what the Voting Rights March of 1965 was all about, demanding that Black people, especially in the Deep South, but throughout the country, is given the rights back to exercise the right of being able to vote as any other citizen. So that's what the Selma to Montgomery March was about. They was protesting in a little town called Marion, Alabama. And Marion, Alabama is where Coretta Scott King was born and raised at. Well, they was protesting in that particular little town in 1965. And as they attempted to march down to the jailhouse, the state police started shooting out the street lights. And when they did that, everybody scattered. And they went into this little cafe, but a state police followed them up in there, hitting them with a billy club. And there was one guy who tried to block the police from hitting his grandfather. Well, the state police pulled out his gun, shot him, and his name was Jimmy Lee Jackson, and he died. And as a result of his death, that was what the people said, well, we're gonna march to Montgomery and demand, Montgomery's our state capital, of course, here in Alabama, and demand the right to the ballot box. So the first attempt to do that march was March 7, 1965. And as they marched across the Edmunds Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, they was met with a sea of state police, county sheriff, deputies, and city police, and the whole works. And they was beaten so bad on that bridge on March 7, 1965 was a Sunday. It's referred to as Bloody Sunday. But eventually, a couple of weeks later, a federal judge in Montgomery, they had petitioned this court, the federal courts, for a parade permit, a marching permit, and that was granted. So they left Browns Chapel AME Church, I believe on the, I believe 21st, I stand corrected, of March. And it took them 5 days. 5 days, it was a total of 54 miles from the steps of Browns Chapel AME Church in Selma to the steps of the state capitol in Montgomery. It was 54 miles. It took them 5 days. They had 4 different campsites. They would bed down at night and continue the march the next day. Now, I joined the march on the 4th day, the 4th leg of the march. For the reason being, the previous 2 days, the highway was only a 2-lane highway and only 300 people could participate in that portion of the march. But on the start of the 4th day, the 4th leg of the march, the highway was a 4-lane highway and as many people wanted to participate could. So that's when my sisters and I, my mother left to go to work that particular day and told us to go to school. Well, we hopped on the back of Mr. Cosby's truck, pickup truck, and we went and joined the march. And so we marched 15 miles from campsite number 3 to campsite number 4, all the way into Montgomery. Now, how did I feel? I'm 12 years old. I'm not really, I don't know really, it's something happened and I just want to be in it. I want to be a part of it. I did get to see Dr. King. When we got up to the Montgomery airport, we marched right by the Montgomery airport. And I was way back in the march. And of course, Dr. King was way up front. But as I got up to the airport, I could see Dr. King walking into the airport. Well, we kept on marching into town. So from Montgomery, Dr. King at this time is living in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm thinking, a flight from Montgomery, Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia is all of 30 minutes. So I'm thinking maybe he's just going home to get a change of clothes or something to eat, check on the family. But I found out from a guest in 2019, believe it or not, one of my guests told me that was not the case. The case was they had decided that it would not be ideal for Dr. King to be in front of the line marching into Montgomery. They was afraid somebody a sniper would shoot and kill him. So he went into the airport and got on a rental car and came onto the campsite. But so in later years now, to understand what I was a part of, I wished I had stayed on for the 5th leg where we marched on to the state capitol, but I was afraid my mom was going to be upset with us. But so like I said, to know that at that time that I was a part of history, I was 12 years old. So it was just something that was happening. Anything that's exciting going on, you as a child wants to be involved in it. Now that I look back over it, yeah, of course, I take pride that I was involved in it. Now.
That's amazing that you were. And you mentioned you're a history major. Another very incredible figure during that time was John Lewis. Right. And so we wanted to ask you, what does he represent for you?
Well, he represented, well, of course, John Lewis, as he famously coined the phrase, got into good trouble. And if you check back through history, just about everything, the Nashville student movement, he was involved in that. The Freedom Riders, he was involved in that. The Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March, he was involved in that. The March on Washington, he was involved in that. So he was, until he died last year, he was constantly striving for a better for humanity. And certainly he is always one that we have to always admire his courage and the things that he did. Now, I have to admit, and I have not said this to anybody else, but up until probably the last couple of years, did I realize the true meaning of nonviolence. I I guess I had never been put into a situation when I was involved in the civil rights activity, but I never understood it as way I understand it now. Because frankly, I probably was of the opinion somebody hits me, I'm going to hit them back, you know. But you know, as a historian now and going back through what all of these people did and had to go through with, it gives you a new sense of appreciation of what they did and how they went through with it. So John Lewis, of course, is, you know, way high on my radar. Admiration for him and what he did and the things he went through.
Yeah, and we wanted to kind of change the gears and talk a little bit about your current job. And you've been a tour guide for a while now. And we just wanted to know how it feels to teach all this history that you've been telling to us and that you've lived through with others who might not know about it or know the full story, or who have most likely not heard it from someone who experienced it. And why do you think this is important? Do you feel a responsibility? Just tell us a little bit.
Well, you know, as a tour guide, I can relate in the first person. This is what we did. This is how we did it. You know, versus some other tour guides who maybe have to learn everything from a book. As I said, you know, like even now when I go into a textbook and study the nonviolence, I can relate to it, you know, because I was involved in it, even though I didn't really understand it at that time. But I got a better sense of it now. So me telling history or touring, first of all, I've had people from, God, every country, so many different countries tell. It's just been amazing how many people from all over the world that have come to Montgomery, Alabama to try to get a grips on our history. And not to mention the people here in the United States. You know, I have a lot of white guests who will come and they're from the North and stuff, and they kind of heard about this, but they really didn't know about it, you know. I have some white guests who were from the South, but they were shielded from this by their parents during the Civil Rights era. And so, you know, it's just, I'm tickled pink when I can enlighten them. You know, I had one compliment from a lawyer, and his remark was that he learned more history in 10 minutes from me than he learned all the way through school. So that's what I really try to base my tours upon, is history. And that's what I tried to do for you here earlier. But to my main objective is to make sure people go away from here, leave me with more knowledge than what they came with. That's my goal. And to see, I you know, just this coming Saturday, I have some homeschool children coming from South Carolina. And I just really, you know, I light up when I have the kids. And really adults too, because sometimes this is so new to them, so revealing to them, but especially when I have young students. I was trained to be a teacher, didn't do too much of it, but I was trained to be a teacher. And when I have students and can really get through to them, then it's all worth it.
And how has COVID affected your business? Are you still giving tours? And how, according to you, can people help with the tour guide businesses right now?
Yeah, well, you know, I last year, all of my bookings was from March to a good September, October was canceled. I maybe had 2 or 3 tours in November of last year, likewise in December. January this year, I maybe had 3 or 4 tours, and what's this, February? I think I got 2. But last year, my calendar was completely booked. And when the virus hit, everybody, of course, canceled. Getting some inquiries now, slowly. People are ready to get out and ready to get back. I have continually, if anybody requests a tour, I give it. I thoroughly sanitize my van. I wear gloves and masks throughout the tour. I have extra gloves and face masks and sanitizer and all of that kind of stuff. I even have a thing to do your temperature with, to make it available to my guests and for them to feel safe and for me to feel safe. We try to have all of this, and I hadn't stopped giving tours, but they stopped coming. But I'm hoping for better things this year.
Yeah, and then also the second part of Layla's question, like, I want to know, how can we support you during this time? How can everyone watching support you and your business? Because you just
Yeah, you know, we have a lot of people in the trades, and I guess we get the same question of what can we do? And you know, until we get these vaccination in people's arms that they feel more safer traveling, really, I just don't see anything that you can do. You know, people got to feel comfortable traveling again. And until they do, that's basically nothing else that I can, you know, that anybody can do, as far as I see it, you know.
And then our last question is, you know, one of my favorite things about being on that trip with you was that you showed me everything from, or us and everyone, everything from the Alabama State Capitol or the Montgomery State Capitol to going to the Justice Initiative, and how extremely relevant all of that is in not only American history, but to this day. And so with that being said, you were marching for equality 60 years ago, and then now you're seeing what's happening in the current day. Do you think we've made any progress? And if so, what is it? And also just what can people do to take action to fight the inequalities?
Yeah, but you know, it's like I try to say to most of my guests, especially when I go onto the grounds of the state capitol here in Alabama, and I tell all of my guests, had this been 30 or 40 years ago, me, a Black man on the grounds of the Alabama State Capitol, in a Southern turn, I would have been in a heap of trouble. You know, we have a long ways to go, but we've come a long ways. You know, things that I had President Obama ask me, should he run for president? I would have definitely told him, no, you cannot win. You know, that was just not anything I imagined ever seen in my lifetime. Yeah. That there's a lot of hurdles that we've come over, but we still got a lot more to go, you know. A lot of this, unfortunately, and I said to some guests the other week, it's going to really have to die out, you know, because you can't legislate it. You can't make folks drop their racist views and stuff. You can't, you know, you can't make them do that. So unfortunately, a lot of people got to die. But, you know, nevertheless, you know, you reflect back to Dr. King's speech of I have a dream of my four little children holding hands with former, you know, with slave holders and children all holding hands. And we see all of this is coming to fruition now, and it's going to even come even further. But the things that me as a 68-year-old guy is seen as just things that I would not have imagined in my upbringing, my early childhood. Was just unthinkable. The doors that have been opened. Even now, I see things, and had I known, I could have been an air traffic controller. Had I known, I could have been a pilot. Had I known, I could have been a model. You know, those people in the magazine, they get paid for this. That's always things that I couldn't even imagine when I was growing up. That I to see the work that engineers do.
Mhm.
Wow, they are amazing people. Yeah. And doctors and lawyers and all this, but all of those doors was not open for me. They was not open for me. And so, like I said, I had a nephew who went to engineering school, and Lord, the money he's been making ever since he graduated. But the bottom line, I guess what I'm trying to say is that those opportunities wasn't available to me. Wasn't even something I could dream of because those doors was not open for me. But a lot more doors are open now.
Yeah. So there is progress being made, but it's sometimes it's really hard to see the positive because there's so much more work that needs to be done.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think, like, long term we fix this polarization in our country? Is it education? How do we get to that good spot?
Yeah. Well, it's got to be education, because the more educated we get, the better people that we are. And that's on both sides of the aisle, really. There's a song that says, "No one is no blinder than one who will not see." And we're seeing evidence of that right now. But education is going to open up a whole lot of eyes, open up a whole lot of doors as well. So education's got to be the key. It's got to be the key because with education comes the economic push and everything else. It's like here in Montgomery, I'm quite often asked, and I just cannot think of a neighborhood here in Montgomery that a Black person cannot live in. Because there are some Blacks here in Montgomery, Alabama, can afford to live anywhere in this city they want to live, and they do. They can afford it. So we're more divided by economics than we are by race right now. But there are some people who have been, elevated themselves to where they can do these things,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us, Jake. It was so great to get to speak with you and learn a little bit of this history from you. Now that we are done with this conversation, it's time to take action. So to everyone listening, please go check out Jake's website, mymontgomerytours.com. If you're ever in Montgomery, definitely call him. Also, go to the Equal Justice Initiative website and learn more about their work on criminal justice reform. And don't forget to continue getting into good trouble, like John Lewis said.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure to be with you.
It was so good to kind of see you.
Yeah, it was, our whole family sends love. Me and my mom do, and Shelly and everyone. That was a good trip. So.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Bye, Jake.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Jake. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.